Hi there, so today I'm going to show you how to arm knit a blanket using our Epic Extreme yarn. And I'm going to show you how to make a slip knot, how to cast on and then knit, and how to cast off. So let's get going. So just before we start, let me show you the type of blanket that I'm going to be making. So here we go. So if you have a look at my phone here, this is the type of blanket that we're going to be making. So it looks very much like a stockinette stitch. And that's one that I prepared earlier, or you might have seen it at the beginning of this video as well. But that's what we're going to be aiming for. We're going to be aiming for nice stockinette stitches, which are identified by these little V's. And yeah, let's give it a go. So, okay, so to start with, you're going to be wanting to make a slip knot. And to make a slip knot, what you do is you make a little circle like this. So your working yarn is here and you make a, should I say, your tail is here and your working yarn is at this side. And you make a little circle and put your working yarn underneath so it looks like this. And then if you grab that little loop and just pull on it, that's how you make a slip knot. And you want to have your tail that's about maybe 30 centimetres in length, because that'll help us when we're weaving in the ends later. So to start with, we're going to put this onto our left hand. And if we just take the tail and just pop it down here, you're not going to be using it anymore. And if we just pull on the working yarn and just push this stitch up to the bottom of our wrist so that we can get just one finger underneath. And I'm going to cast on 10 stitches. So to cast on 10 stitches, if you just make a circle like this, take the circle and pop that onto your hand, like so. And then if we do that again, we make a circle and we can just pop that onto our hand. And if we make another one, and we can just pop that onto our hand. And another one. I'm also going to show you a different cast on technique at the end, just in case your cast on stitches are coming out a bit loose. I'm going to show you another way how to do them. So I'm casting on 10 stitches here, and next I'm going to show you how to knit. Have I got 10 stitches? So when they're on your arm like this, they can scrunch up really tight together like this. So I can easily achieve between 20 and 24 stitches on my arms. I have had up to 30, but I wouldn't recommend that because it comes quite tight. But the key is with your arms is, if you think about the width of your wrist and the width of your arm as it goes up there. Now, if you've got quite straight arms like my daughter, you can get stitches all the way up to your elbows. Now, if your arms are a little more chunky like mine, I struggle to get it any further up my arms than maybe here, because actually you wanting all of your stitches to be the same size, and if they're not, it starts looking a bit strange. So just keep that in mind, how many stitches you can get on your arms. As I say, I easily get between 20 and 24. So to actually knit, we're going to put our yarn over our thumb from front to back. And we drop that off our hand, the stitch that was on our wrist. We drop it off and we don't touch it again. And then we put our hand through, so we put our hand through this loop in the direction that the thumb is pointing, and that's really important in order to get your stitches looking like the stockinette stitch that I showed you at the beginning. If you end up putting your hand through in different directions or different ways, you're still arm knitting, but you're not going to achieve that nice stockinette stitch. You'll achieve more of a lattice work. It just looks completely different. But the key tip I've got for you is put your hand through in the direction of your thumb. If you just remember that, you are good. Also, you want to make sure that you work with your yarn at the back of you. So you don't want it dangling down the front, you want your yarn at the back as if you were just normally knitting. So again, we put our yarn over our thumb from front to back, and then we drop the next stitch off. We then put our hand through in the direction that our thumb's pointing, and we just pop that onto the new hand. And one thing I want to point out to you here is how do you get, now if you look at these two stitches, this one at this point is really baggy and this one is sat nicely up to my wrist. So the key is here is just to take the tension off. So push the stitch with this hand just up, holding on to the working yarn at the same time. And that just means that if you put your finger underneath the stitches, they're just all about the same width. Yeah, so you don't want one baggy one and one tight one. You just want to be doing that little push up there at the beginning of each stitch, or at the end of each stitch, should I say, just to make sure that they're all sitting nice and the same. So again, yarn over our thumb from front to back, then we drop our next stitch off the hand, we don't touch it again, and we pop that onto our hand and just pull that up like that so it sits underneath your wrist. Again, we've got our yarn over our thumb from front to back, and we drop that stitch off and then put our hand through in the direction that our thumb is pointing. And then again. Now, let me just share something with you after having knitted these blankets for I don't know however many years. When you're arm knitting, don't be tempted to pull your arms apart. You want to always think as if you're holding a coffee cup. Keep your hands nice and close together. If you start pulling your arms apart at this stage, this stitch here is going to get really long and loose, and it's going to look different to the rest of them. So I always, in my classes, if you were in my studio with me and I was teaching you face to face, I'd just be saying, imagine you're holding a coffee cup and you won't go wrong. So yarn over your thumb from front to back, drop that stitch off, and you've got your new stitch there that's been created, and we're going to put our hand through in the direction that our thumb is pointing. And then this is the last one. I don't think I actually cast on 10, I might have 8 here, but hey, you're still getting the gist of it. Okay, so final stitch for this row, and we've got our new stitch and we put that on there. So this is what it looks like after completing one row. You won't see the stitches yet, but after maybe 2 or 3 rows, you'll start to see your stitches and you'll go, wow. Okay, so when we're working from right to left, it's just the same principle really. Let's get rid of that tail there so you're not seeing it. So you take your working yarn and you put it over your thumb from front to back, making sure that your yarn is always at the back when you're working. And what we're going to do is we're going to just drop that stitch off. We're not going to touch it again. And then we're going to put our hand through in the direction that our thumb's been pointing, remembering to just slide our stitch to the bottom of our hand. And we do that again. So yarn from front to back and drop the stitch off and put your hand through in the direction that your thumb's pointing. And you just do that all of the way across this row. And I'll show you what it looks like in a minute. So when I'm working with my yarn, you will have a big ball which I've got sat here, and what I do is I just roll off maybe 3 or 4 meters when I'm working, and then I use that up, and then I roll off another 3 or 4 meters. I find that's the easiest way to work with it. So now we've got our yarn back to our original hand, and we're just going to do what we initially did, which was put our yarn from front to back, drop the stitch over, and then put our hand through in the direction that our thumb is pointing. And you'll see that once you get going, once you've got this mastered, making these blankets is a really quick job. And you know, you can easily have a good sized blanket made in just a few hours. What I would say is, if you're considering making one of these blankets, the yarn is the biggest investment. Look, you can see those stitches starting to come together now. The yarn is the biggest investment. So when I first started out, I cut up t-shirts and towels, and instead of trying to learn arm knitting with your good expensive wool, I just mastered the technique with something that was much cheaper, because the key is that when you make these blankets, they won't take you a long time as long as you know the technique, and you want to get the best out of your wool. So let's do it again. We've got our yarn from front to back, and we drop that stitch off and we pop that onto our next hand, and we just keep going. So people say to me, what do you do when you've got to answer the door or go to the loo or anything like that? Well, let me show you. It's really quite easy. I mean, one, you will have these done quickly, but if you do need to make a quick exit from your knitting, let me just show you what I do. So, I've not got a belt. I would normally use a leather belt, but just imagine that this is a leather belt. All you need to do is slip these off your hand, like so. I'm not going to go all the way. Oh, can't get this stitch through. So you can see, you can just slip them off onto a leather belt, and then at a point where you want to come back, you can just put them back on. And all you need to remember is that your working yarn needs to be towards the end of your fingers. You don't want your working yarn down there, because otherwise you're going to have to move your knitting over to your other arm, and then you can just pop them back on like that. So I'm going to do another row now, and I'm just going to talk to you about the size of stitches that you want to achieve. So with arm knitting, generally your stitch will be about 2.2 inches in width and about 3 inches in length. So say you want a 22-inch blanket. You know that you just need to cast on 10 stitches, because each stitch is a width of 2.2 inches, and therefore 10 stitches equals 22 inches. And that's all you need to think about. And then with regards to how long you want your blanket, each of these stitches, let me just pull them out so I can show you. Each of these stitches are about 3 inches in length. So 3 inches, that is just under 8 centimetres. So if I just show you that, you can see that mine are just about 8 centimetres in length. So if you wanted it 80 centimetres in length, you'd be having 10 rows. So that's how you work out your width and your length. So I'll do one more row, and I'll talk to you about weights of yarn and how much you would need in order for a blanket of your liking. So 2 kilos gives a blanket that's about 30 inches by 50 inches. So I always think about that as being a great size for like an armchair. 3 kilos or 4 kilos are perfect for a sofa or a double bed. I like to have these at the bottom of my bed, and 4 kilos will give you 40 inches by 60 inches in length, and I always think that that is a great size for a double bed. Now, if you're really technical and you want to work out it exact, what you can do is you can do a square meters calculation. So say you want a blanket 2 meters by 2 meters. If you get a square meter calculator and put in 2 by 2 meters, so 2 in the width and 2 meters in the height, that'll give you your square meter calculation. And if you divide that square meter calculation by 0.48, if you divide it by that, it will tell you exactly how much yarn you need. But if you don't know how to do that, don't worry, just email me and I'll do it for you. I'll put our email address down below. So, I've got, how many rows have I got here? I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got 5 rows here, and now I want to show you how to cast off. So, to cast off, we just knit 2 stitches as normal. So 1, 2, like that. And then to cast off, you simply take the first stitch you knitted and drop that off the end of your hand. And then you can knit another stitch like this and drop that one off the end of your hand. So you're just going to be doing that all of the way across. And at the end of this, I will show you how to weave in your ends. So when you're working with our Epic Extreme yarn, it's an unspun merino, so what it means is that there's no twist in it. So if you look at it, all the fibres are running really straight. So what you need to be careful of with any type of unspun yarn is that if you get it and all your fibres are straight and you pull on it, and I'm going to do this to leave a tail, you pull on it, it will just pull apart like that. And that's because it's unspun. Now, if you twist that, and knit puts a natural twist in it, you cannot pull that apart. Yep. And that is what unspun yarn is like. So what you need to make sure of, that when you're first knitting it, before it's got into its knitted state, that you're not just pulling on it slightly like that and it'll all come apart. But if you just knit it, and if you just knit it like I was doing, you'll have no problem whatsoever. So this is what our piece is looking like. So when you've got your last hoop left, all you do is you take your tail and just pull it through that last hoop. And that's it. And now we can just take some time to admire it. So this is your cast off end. This is actually my favourite bit of the blanket. I think it looks so pretty. And this is your casted on end. And if we turn it over, this is what it looks like on the other side. And now what I want to show you how to do is how to tie in these ends. Now I've been making and selling these blankets for as long as I can remember, and I've seen lots of different techniques used for tying off your ends, but my favourite one that I use, and the easiest one that I have found, is I go to the back of my work and here's my tail that I want to tie in. So what I do is I find the back of a stitch. So let's say I'm going to use the back of this stitch. So what I do is I take my yarn and I split it into two like that. I then take one end behind this stitch, like so, so that I'm not pulling it on it tight. We don't want it like that. We just want it to sit nice and flat against our work. And then I take my other end and I take it in front of that stitch. And at this point, I just make a double knot. So like I say, I've seen methods for felting in these stitches. I've seen so many different ways, but even when I produce these commercially and sell them as finished blankets, this is how I finish them off. I pull this really tight, so you've got a knot like that, and then I take my scissors and I just snip the ends off. And I've made thousands, I don't know, tens of thousands of blankets, it feels like sometimes, and I have never had a problem with these knots coming out. So once we've got to that stage, I just pop it under the stitch there, and it just tends to stay there, and it just works absolutely fine for me. It doesn't look unsightly, it's easy to do, and yeah, that's how I work my blankets. So that is my arm knitted blanket. I hope that has been helpful. If you do have any questions, please do ask me down below and I'll be happy to help. And if you need any help with working out the measurements or weights of your blankets, just email me. I'll put my email address down below as well, and we'll be happy to help. So hope that's helpful. Please do give it a thumbs up if you like it, and look forward to seeing you again where we'll do lots more crafting. Oh, and please subscribe. Thanks guys, bye bye.